want to earn more? Work less and enjoy what you do each day. It's no secret, it can be done. This podcast with Dr. T will not only educate and inspire you, it will also teach you how to do more and be more with the time you already have. It will be like a shot of adrenaline straight into the heart of your business. Here is your host, Tyson Franklin.
Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of It's No Secret with Dr. T. With me today is Carey Rome. Now, Carey started as a CPA and an advisor to business before starting his own entrepreneurial journey, which is, or has been, a very interesting journey. He uses software and systems he's developed to coach and train others how to scale and grow their businesses. I am super looking forward to this. Carey, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm great. It's very early for me. It's 5:30 in the morning.
Yes,
and
it is.
I actually like early starts. How about you? Are you a morning person?
I get up at 4:30, and that's my routine. And a goal for me is to be able to back that up to about 5:30.
Yeah.
But right now, where we are in life is, particularly during this school year, I'm part of the carpool equation. And so I need to have I do a Bible study, I do some work, I do a workout, I drink some coffee, and then I start getting ready. I have a little breakfast, and I'm part of the carpool, try to get to work by 8. So I just had to back it up to 4:30, but I had to stop. I did 4:15, 4 o'clock. And that it's too much.
What I find funny is when I was running my podiatry practice and I had to be at work at 8:30, I would be dragging my butt out at 7:15, 7:30, and I would rock up at work at 8:29. Really found it difficult. And I said, the day when I've sold my practice, the time is my own, I'm going to sleep in for as long as I want to. I'm lucky now if I stay in bed after 5 a.m.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that is because you're inspired more now than you were when you were actually running a practice?
I think what happens, I enjoyed running the practice. It was a lot of fun, and I do coaching in that area, helping podiatrists, and I really enjoy it. But I think you get in that rut sometimes of doing the same thing day in, day out, that your brain is not inspired. And
it feels like Groundhog Day.
Yeah, pretty much like Groundhog Day. I won't sing the song how Groundhog Day starts because I've got that in my head now.
You definitely don't want me to sing the song.
No, but what started me getting up really early was when I wrote my first book. Because I was working, the only time I had to do it was I had to get up super early. Yeah. So I'd get up at 4 a.m. and write from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. before everybody else started stirring. And I did that for about a good solid 6 months, and that sort of got me in that habit of, wow, it's amazing how much more you can get done when you get started early. Doesn't mean I get up at 4 a.m. now, but my brain starts to stir.
Do you find that when 7 or 7:30 or 8, when the rest of the world starts moving, do you feel like you've already got some wind at your back? I do.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think, even now, if I'm up at 5 o'clock, if I've got one or two things done by 6:30, sometimes I look at my watch and I go, well, it's only 7 a.m. and I've done this already. This is fantastic.
Yeah, you got some momentum.
So
I love
great. That. So let's get back on to the Carey Rome story. Give us a little bit of backstory on, because you went from being a CPA, and now you've been on this entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of backstory.
Yeah, I'll go even further back from before becoming a CPA. I am a CPA somehow, probably just persistence. It took me 6 or 7 times to pass the exam. I am not a gifted student, a gifted test taker, particularly those type of standardized tests. As it turns out, I didn't learn until later in life that I had a struggle with reading comprehension. And it wasn't just determination that I was just going to push through, but I ended up as a CPA because I told my father I wanted to own my own business one day, and he knew an uncle that had a successful business. He said, you need to go talk to Uncle Raul. And so I went and talked to Uncle Raul, and Uncle Raul had was a CPA and had worked as an accountant, and he thought it was great exposure to a multitude of businesses. And so there it was. I started majoring in accounting. When he said accounting, Tyson, I sort of hung my head. I said, no, not accounting. But sort of going back to what he said, which is it's great exposure to a multitude of businesses. It was a fabulous experience. It was from the standpoint of exposure to businesses, business owners, why they started, how they grew it. And when I started doing the accounting work, to me, that was boring and sort of got into the routine of things. But yeah, I was at Arthur Andersen, was there when everything imploded with that great firm. And then went into industry and, sort of decided at that point, I want a seat at the table, and I'm using air quotes here. I want a seat at the table. I didn't even know what that meant, except for I'm not going to make the salary everybody else is, because I want a little equity. I want equity. I want earned equity. And I know that I'm going to sweat for that equity.
Was this all taking place in Alabama, where you're from now?
All in Alabama. I grew up in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Had several opportunities to move back to Louisiana, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So I worked at a couple of small businesses before I said, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to go out. And Tyson, I started renting. I started by renting a closet. It was a work closet, but some attorneys have really, really nice offices where they visit with their clients.
Yeah.
And then where they do the grunt work, they call it a work closet. Well, I rented his work closet for $400, and it was me and a computer and a white pad, a white sheet of paper.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, I sat down. I walked in that day. It's a funny story. I was driving on the way, and I said, I'm going to go get some Starbucks, and I got my Starbucks, and I'm walking up the steps, and I remember tripping on the steps, and my coffee went everywhere. And I said, no, I'm not starting my first day like that. Got back in the
that was
car.
A sign.
No, I was not going to let it be a sign. Got back in my car, drove back to Starbucks, got another cup, walked back up, and then I sat down. And when I sat down, it's just sort of this, oh my gosh, here we are. It's the journey of an entrepreneur where you decide you're going to do it, but that first day, there's sort of that burn in your gut. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep. You think some people, it's what stops them doing that first day? For a lot of people, they're sitting there going, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think there's any one or two things that stop people making that decision?
From ever getting started?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think fear is... There's a fear of, what could happen. And, I like to play out a scenario of what's the worst thing that could happen, build a plan so that the worst thing doesn't happen, and be okay if the worst thing happens.
Oh, that is so cool that you said that, because that's exactly what I tell people.
Yeah, because that's the best we can do. But sitting back, I've always had this, speaking of fears, I've always had this fear of looking back on life and regretting that I didn't take opportunities.
Yeah.
And so it's probably a bit of it's in my personality, my DNA, that I'm gonna do things and I'm gonna find a way. But I think a lot of it comes down to people think the current path means that it's safe, and it's not. The current path does not mean safe, and change is hard. Change means uncertainty, but unless you challenge yourself and unless you change, you're gonna follow somebody else's rules and someone else's path, and you may look back one day and say, I wish I would have.
Yeah, true.
And I just don't want to live with that regret. So I think that's sort of the first answer is people are just have that fear, and maybe that comes from they don't have confidence in their ability to do the work. They don't have confidence in their ability to network. They don't have confidence to sort of push through. I think that's on the front end. On the back end, though, I think it's also I think people, they launch, and then whatever their core skill is, they default back to that because that's their technical skill. And they sort of they feel comfortable in that zone, and so they ignore the other pieces of the business that are going to cause it to thrive. And as a small business owner, as it would have been easy for me to default back and just do the accounting work. But when there's nothing to account for, it makes the math pretty easy. So I've got to figure out how to sell. I've got to figure out how to market. I've got to figure out how to have a unique value proposition to a target customer. All things that, frankly, I should have thought through a lot more before I started.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point there, is you didn't think about that until after you had opened your doors, whereas you should be thinking about that beforehand.
Absolutely. And, I think I remember I created such a detailed, it's like 25-page business plan with about 4 pages of words. It was all just formulas, and this is going to happen. And, of course, none of it happened the way I planned it out, because it never does. But I remember a banker saying, this is the most detailed analytics sort of backed and driven plan that I've ever seen. Looks like it was, and it started out extremely slow and rocketed up really fast and then dropped back. And it's not that straight line up like you want. It's not that gradual line that you draw out the path. And it's, I think it's weathering those ups and downs and not defaulting back to that, whatever your technical experience is.
So talking about business plans too, I know when I was at university, we had one business subject, and you had to do a business plan. If you were going to set up a podiatry practice, what would you do? So I sat down, wrote this business plan, probably at 30 pages, and I think it's actually just sitting up on my shelf here. And I still have it because I look at it and laugh every now and then. But I wrote this thing. I got 100% for this particular project. First person in the university, including the business students, to get 100% for this subject.
Yeah.
Then I went and set up my own practice and did not follow one thing I wrote down there.
Yeah. I think I'm a fan of the exercise.
Yeah.
But you need to be realistic that it's going to change. I think having the ability to be nimble and adapt, and just know that I've heard it said that have firm beliefs that are loosely held, right? Meaning that I firmly believe in this path, but I'm not so stubborn to ignore if I need to pivot.
Or if new information comes to hand that lets you know that, hang on, that belief I've held is not exactly true, you need to be able to change.
Yeah, you need to pivot, and I think that's a lot of the learning process. Any entrepreneur, this. I've learned it. It's you dive in, you consume new information, you sort of try to ingest it in a way that's the most positive for your business, and keep learning. It is when you open the doors as day one as an entrepreneur is when you start the learning process, like at a level that you've never learned before.
Yeah, that's true. So now though, you're helping more executive teams. Sort of get their act together and sort of drive forward.
Yeah. So, thanks for getting me back on track.
No, that's okay. Everything you were talking about before, they're all important points that people go along this entrepreneurial journey. And that was my first question, was like, what was your story? So everything you just said then was really part of your story. And even that last part about having your beliefs, but being willing to pivot when new information comes to hand, and not, like you said, don't be stubborn and sit there thinking, no, I said this is what I was going to do and this is how I was going to do it, and going down that path until they're towing your car away.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of pivots, I started in 2005, and I started with a business that I'm going to go in and I'm going to work with a business owner. I'm going to help them identify a problem, and then I'm going to architect a solution and bring a SWAT team in to solve the problem. That was the business model. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And I did that in a way where I would travel throughout the Southeast primarily, but New York, if someone would see me there, DC often. But I would drop in and I'm hunting for problems. In 2009, so 4 years in, I did work with the COO of a large organization, solved a problem. I felt super proud of the work we had done. We were ahead of schedule. We were under budget. And as I went in to sort of get feedback, he took that opportunity to give me a really good lesson. And the lesson was, he said, Carey, yes, you finished ahead of schedule, and yes, you finished under budget. But if I didn't think you would have had those capabilities, I would have never hired you in the first place. He said, you thought that you solved a big problem for me, and you did.
Yeah.
But 12 and 18 months ago, as an executive, I'm sitting on an island, and I've got no one to help me think through all of the things, not one of the things, but all of the things that I need to get accomplished over the next 12 and 18 months, and how I'm going to cascade that down to my team, and how they're going to do that and balance their day job, and where the gaps in my team are. He said, you're missing an advisory practice. And I thought, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I had to have someone tell me that. I've been chasing problems when there's this real opportunity to advise business owners on this 12 and 18 month path. So I went back and I created this system, and I completely upended my business model. And if there's one thing about my personality, I sort of make the decision I'm going to do something, and I just dive in. And there's probably a more gentle way to make the pivot. I usually don't take that path. I probably should, but I don't. So I just changed everything, and that culminated in the best 5 years that we have ever had. And then fast forward to 2015, and I said, I think I want to pivot again. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to focus, because at the time I was still helping in large part with problems. It was how to solve problems over the next 12 and 18 months.
So are you saying, if I just go back a step, so what you were saying is initially you were just helping them solve a problem. You solve the problem, tick the box, you'd walk away. A singular problem.
Right.
But what this guy has told you is, yes, you solved that problem. Thank you very much. But what is my vision for the future? Can you help me, help guide me over the next 12 or 18 months where I need to go, so I'm not constantly creating new problems?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So think about, if you were building a house, and the old one was, I need a door frame. Yes. And I would go in and I would build the door frame, but the real problem was, as that owner, is I want to build the life of my dreams that I'm going to live in for a period of time. And I want to make sure I do this right. I want to make sure it's laid out in a very logical way. And oh, by the way, having a door framed at one point will be part of it.
Yeah.
But that was just one small thing. So it allowed me to come up a level and really build a model that allows them, in a framework that allows them to see it in a better way, so that they don't get caught up in one project. So back to 2015. In 2015, I said, you know what? I really like the growth side of this. I like the future side of this. I like the vision part of working with executives versus the problem side. And there are problems to overcome when you're growing, and there are problems to overcome when you're implementing strategy and vision, but it's a different type of problem. So we made that pivot in 2015. And then we started working with executive teams, and I had these 11 by 17 pieces of paper that were the framework, and the team members would work through them. And lo and behold, the team members started saying, hey, can we take these extra pieces of paper? And I said, sure. Yeah. But it's sort of that, if you don't know the system and the process, then it's just blocks on a piece of paper. And so that took us down the journey of, we really need to systematize this. We need to create some software. And what that has led me to is what you're seeing behind me, which is I do my work remote. I'm on a whiteboard. I do web meetings. we've created a client portal, and the software and the system that we've created, it's allowed me, I don't have boundaries anymore.
Yeah.
And it's created a wonderful opportunity for me to expand the customers I serve and work with other people who want to do what I do and show them the model that I do. And that's really fun. I mean, I think if you get down to it, one of my favorite things is teaching people that were maybe me 15 years ago. Hey, here's my model. Here's what I did. And it's whether you want to call it coach or mentor them. I really like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great shift that you took, though, from being a problem solver to being helping them. Well, you becoming a visionary, but putting things in place to help them sort of create their own vision as well. So is it purely software based now? Because when we spoke last week, it seems so long ago. It seems like I've known you for ages, but it was only a week ago we were talking. And the whiteboard that's behind you, when we spoke last time, you had some really cool drawings and all that on there. So you use your whiteboard a lot actually to get the ideas out of your head to then explain it to somebody else, or do you use the whiteboard while you're doing a lot of your coaching to explain things?
Great question. The system that I've developed that is and the framework, I use that same framework. I just draw it up on the whiteboard. Yeah. And that gives me structure for my thinking. So when I work with a client, I am working through the process the same way every single time. And that allows me, the last thing I want to do is to have an hour-long conversation where great ideas are tossed around and everybody feels good about it, but none of it's structured. There's no takeaways because you didn't have a method that you followed. You didn't have a system that you worked through. You didn't have processes that led from one question to another. And so that's what you saw behind me. I use the same process to ask the questions, to drive the thought process, and to really generate ideas, and to challenge an executive or executive team to expand their boundaries. What I find is oftentimes, an organization, sometimes they've dug trenches so deep that all they know and all they can see is the trench. They can't look up and see over the trench.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just help them look over the trench and see, hey, there might be a different way to look at this.
Okay. I've got a question for you about, because a lot of times you've mentioned frameworks, putting frameworks together, helping them understand the frameworks, running through the frameworks. Can you just explain quickly the difference between a framework and a system?
I don't know that I would try to make too big of a difference. I sort of use them interchangeably. If you looked at what the system we've developed, it's modular, meaning you can use the first piece, and that can work for smaller business. If there's 2 levels of modules, that might be a little bit bigger business. If there's 3 levels of a business, well, then it's probably a medium-sized business with hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and multiple levels of executives. So I think of it as if I step back and look at it, it's a framework that you see like, oh, I got that. There's a certain approach to that is visible. It's clear. The system piece of it is that literally just taking these modules and this, like I think about almost like Lego pieces, where when you take these pieces, that you're almost completing this piece over here.
Okay, so each module is an individual little piece. And once all those little pieces are put together, then everything sort of unfolds and starts to work.
Exactly. And so when I start working with a client, what the beauty of it is that when you start, if you do steps 1 and 2, you've automatically started step 1 for another person. If you do steps 1, 2, and 3, you've already automatically started steps 1 and 2 for another person. And if that other person does the same thing, they've started steps 1 and 2 for their team members. And when you do it that way, you create these shared interlocking objectives so that we're all working on the same page, because what was started here created what I needed to work on And then it's within my domain expertise. And I detailed out what I needed to do to deliver the results and the objective that I was tasked with. But that just that simple step creates that shared objectives. And I think it creates this alignment that a lot of organizations miss.
Okay. Because a lot of organizations I've seen in the past, and I know I've gone to events where they've tried to change this, where a lot of different departments within an organization, they tend to work in silos. Everyone tries to stay in it. So marketing is over in marketing and accounting is over in accounting, and thou shall not mix. But they don't realize that marketing needs to know what's happening with the finances, and the finance people need to know what marketing is doing. And if they stay working as individual departments and do not come and combine at any time, it's damaging for the business. They need to cross-pollinate with each other and have an understanding of what each other are trying to achieve.
That's perfectly said. I get strategy documents when, oftentimes when I start, and someone says, okay, well, I feel like we're pretty far along. Here's my strategy document. It's a PowerPoint or whatever it is. And I say, great, let's start to unpack this thing. And as I start to apply it to our system, what do we find, Tyson? We find silos, because when you can't tie the overall objective and result of the corporation to the work that you're doing one level down, how in the world are you going to do that 3 levels down? You can't. It only becomes more dysfunctional. And so we have to unpack some of that oftentimes and say, okay, what do we mean by that? Ditch some things, bring some new things in, and really maybe just change the wording on others.
Okay. So, and it's also shared information between everybody in a business.
You just hit on the key to what we do. And when we build out a client portal, all of our information is stored. Every single meeting is stored with a video and audio and a transcription of the meeting. Anyone can go into that meeting and understand the decision criteria around that meeting. Okay. So what do we avoid? We avoid getting an executive team together in a conference room to talk about, to update everybody, when you could simply just drop in and see where they are and get an understanding much faster. It's a much more visual and efficient way to get the information that you want. And it keeps it stored, which is really cool.
Yeah. So if someone wasn't particularly at that meeting, they can easily access it to find out what was happening, get up to speed really fast.
Yeah. The other piece of our business is that when I go and architect all these plans and using our system and drilling down 1, 2, 3 levels down, I'm helping someone think through the challenges that they're going to face and executing on the result that they need to achieve for the 1 level up. And when I do that, often I identify gaps in their team where, hey, you need a strategic resource with a specialized skill to drop in for this amount of time to help you get from here to here. And then you don't need them anymore. And I'll drop someone in, they'll execute, pull them out. That keeps the rhythm of the progress moving forward in a way that it just avoids that, I couldn't do this because, or I didn't think I could ask for the money, or it's a very nimble and fast way to move and make progress.
Okay. You mentioned something then. You mentioned the word money.
Now,
When the word money comes up, some people hear that word and they feel dirty, and other people don't have any feeling towards money. Money is just a piece of paper with pretty colors that you give to someone and they give you something back in exchange. I know that when I got you, I said, Carey, send me your bio, send me some information on what we're going to talk about. And one of the things you wrote down, which I thought was really, really good, was when you said you need your team to know it's not about the money. Can you explain that in a little bit more detail?
Well, it's probably coming from 2 different perspectives. The first perspective is I've worked with executives where we started working through the process and they described where they wanted to go as an organization. They described what they wanted to do in an organization and what they wanted to achieve in pure financial results. This much in revenue, this much in EBITDA, this operational efficiency. And I think when you describe things that way, so overly metric driven, you've lost the why, you've lost the purpose, you've lost the opportunity to really engage an employee and a customer, because they don't care about making you rich.
Yeah.
They don't care about making you rich. Why are they there? They are there to serve your target customer in a certain way, and they believe that their job helps that target customer. The target customer doesn't care about making you rich. They'll pay for an experience that speaks to the value that you promise, but you can't tell them that our goal, I mean, Apple or pick the largest companies in the world. They don't say our goal is to be $1 trillion company. Come buy our phone. They don't do it that way, because it doesn't make sense to the consumer. And so why would it make sense to your employees? So that's my perspective. A lot of executives and CEOs and presidents of companies are so analytical that they lay out a plan. It's all metric driven. They miss the why. They miss but why are we doing this? And what is the one thing that we're going to do to better serve our target customer? And when we do that, we're going to ignite and better engage our employees, because they're here because they love to serve our target customers.
Yeah.
I think they miss that opportunity. So that's the one aspect. The other aspect is, once we get into our system, I often find that people, they're afraid to ask for money. So if they identify that, if it's clearly laid out, hey, I need you, Tyson, to achieve this objective and these 3 results over the next 12 months. If you clearly heard that, you knew it was part of the corporate objective and results, you owned that, but yet you saw an obstacle that was going to cost $20,000. And so you just didn't ask for the money. You didn't say, hey, in order for me to achieve this, there's a need. I'm going to need some support. It's going to cost $20,000. And oftentimes I see people, they say, well, look how much I saved $20,000. But the CEO will say, but at what cost? The opportunity we were chasing was $100,000. And because we didn't spend 20, we couldn't go after 100.
Okay.
And so helping teams that are so ingrained in their day job think through that you are part of executing on the future of your organization, how you're going to grow. And to do that, we need to think a little bit differently. You're not thinking inside of a box anymore. You're thinking, how do we solve this? And if it costs money, raise that question, raise the cost to your direct report, and let them make the call.
Okay. Does a lot of this come back to a person's belief around money? Like you said earlier on, that they'll have these certain beliefs, but they've got the beliefs set in concrete around money, and some of the beliefs may be negative, and they bring that into a workplace. Because when you said before about, say, for example, the business just going to their team and saying, our goal is to make $100 million next year, that doesn't motivate the team. But if they say, our goal is to help our target clients achieve this, this, and this, and we want to help this many people, okay, right, they can get behind that, and the money will flow on afterwards.
Exactly.
When you're talking about buying that piece of equipment, would it be, because a lot of times, like I've had a lot of people that I know that work in government departments, and in that government department, they will approach the people above, and they'll be given a certain budget that they've got to use for the year, and the budget might be $1 million for their department, and they try to do whatever they can to make sure they stay within that budget, because if they go outside that budget, they're too scared to say we want more to achieve this. So instead, they don't go outside the budget. But then when it gets right towards the end of the financial year, and all of a sudden they've got all this money left over, they'll just blow it on anything, because they think, if we do not spend this money, we can't ask for the same amount of money next year.
Well, you've really tapped into just stupid rules. And
yeah, there you go. Stupid government rules.
It's just, I've seen that before, and it's it is it is trying to when you're not, what you're doing, what you're telling, I think with that sort of forced, you're telling your people, I don't trust you to make decisions. And so therefore you have to follow this structure. And so if you tell me, okay, I can't make my own decisions, I can't propose new things and spending because of a forced structure, then I'll play the game given the constraints you gave me.
Yeah.
And now you're playing a game with your financial resources, which is dumb. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I've got a good friend of mine, Jesse Green, and he said something really cool once, and he was talking, and he does a lot of work with dentists, and he was talking about putting budgets in place for, say, ordering materials, because dentistry materials are quite expensive, and it can blow out really, really easily. And he said you should set them a budget, and you want them ideally to stay within that budget. However, if they need to go over and above that, all they need to do is come to you and say, we need to spend our normal budget plus this, but for this reason. And if the reason is a positive reason, then you let them spend the extra money. Don't say that you must stay within this budget. And then, because the other reason too, if you only give them a certain budget, like the government department, and they don't spend it all, they're going to blow it at the end because they want to show that, we were right. We did need that amount of money.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't take money away from me. It's just, it's an interesting thing. You were also talking about personality traits. There are people that in their DNA, they are frugal and they don't want to ask for money. I remember working with a client, and I knew from working directly with who he reported to, I knew the urgency that we needed to operate in. And I remember saying, hey, this is going to be big. In order to get this done in this time frame, it's going to be X number of million of dollars. Yeah. We were asking for multiple. He said, I can't ask for that much money. I'll get fired. And I told him, if you don't ask for this money, you'll get fired. If you sit back with your hands, sitting on your hands, and you let failure happen because you were afraid to ask for money, there is without question you'll get fired. We went in, we made the case very logical. Here's what it's going to take. Here's the math. And within 30 minutes, they said, okay, let's go. It was so simple because we had done the prep work. We had framed it up in a way that tied to a shared objective.
Yeah. And
then it was no longer something rogue. It wasn't something rogue. It was something that was shared. And so there was no reason. It's a lot of money to ask for, but the reasons behind it were valid.
I think that's a really good point, because if the reasons behind it are valid and you can prove it and let the numbers do the talking, then it's easy to make a decision. What type of businesses do you normally work with? So if you're looking at, are there certain industries that you specifically target, a certain size business? Can you give us a bit of lowdown on that?
Absolutely. So I'll start with growth companies, and some people might say, well, everybody wants to grow. True, but in large part, there's a lot of companies that do operational planning, meaning, and that's the budget thing you referenced.
Yeah,
we're going to do a 3% increase next year. We're going to grow 3%. That's not a growth-oriented company, so I don't work necessarily with those. I work well with companies that are typically in the 15 to 20 million and up, stopping at about 500 million to 750 million in revenue, and that have the capital to deploy towards growth, meaning they have a vision, they want to architect a plan, and they want to execute to be better than they are now, to do things different than they are now. Hence the whiteboard.
Yeah.
We don't start with a plan. We start with a blank piece of paper and a whiteboard, and we unpack it and we figure out a way to get it done. And it's just like that journey of entrepreneurship, in that we're going to make the best plan we can, but we're going to do it in a way where it's nimble and we can pivot when we have to. But standing still is not an option. So did that answer the question?
No, it did. It told me the sort of the size businesses you work with.
Yeah.
But what I want to point out to anyone who's listening to this now, if you have a business that's turning over $500,000 or only turning over $1 million, everything that you've said so far still applies to that particular business. See, what I like about it is even the $6 million man couldn't work with you because his budget's not big enough. So,
well, I've helped. I say I've got a client that is we've never worked with a nonprofit except for this one. He happened to be in the building we're in.
Yeah.
And so we were working with one. He needed to completely reinvent his business model. It was failing. And so they're a $2 million nonprofit. It's just, I was talking earlier about the modules. We just use one of the modules. We don't use the other modules. It's a simplified version. And so it's done call it the lightweight version. So that's not my target customer, but I do help those. And I've helped some of those organizations with just a one-time, hey, let's talk through this. I'll lay out a 12-month roadmap for you. It looks like this, and then you can run with it. And that seems to be pretty helpful for a lot of people.
No, well, I think that's great. And you've got two books. One is 3% Leader, and the other one is The Quick Win Strategy Guide. So some of what you've covered today are in both of those books?
Yeah.
Or more so in one book than the other?
The Quick Win Strategy Guide. Actually, they both feed to the other.
And they're both available on Amazon if anybody's listening.
Yeah, and by the way, they are short books. They are short books, 35 pages or so, just designed to. I probably need to tell more stories in books. How did you do your book? Did you write a lot of stories? I mean, I don't want to write just to write. I just don't want to write just to fill paper. I wanted to.
I used a lot of, in both my books, I used a lot of personal examples, stories that I went through. Some were very sad stories. Some were uplifting. But I use stories and I use practical examples of what I'd done myself in business. So, I think they were about 230 pages. But I don't want to, I'm in my process of writing another one and I don't want it to be that big. I actually want to write shorter books and do more of them than writing that bigger book. Because I think smaller books are snackable. It's easier for people to pick it up, read it in a short period of time, and then go and apply it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. I don't want I didn't want anybody to get 2 chapters in and say this is causing me to think too much, or there's not enough stories to help support. Probably part of it's I wanted to get it done in a way that got the information to someone that wanted that information. And so it's very, there's to improve on those. There's a lot of storytelling, but if you do want something that is a quick tip, good takeaways, both of those are on Amazon.
But what I think is interesting, sometimes you can read a book that can be a number one bestseller all around the world. You get hold of the book, you start reading it, and you know what? You could have finished after the second chapter, and you've pretty much got everything you need from the book, and the rest of it is a repeat. It's fluff. It's just saying what they said in the first 2 chapters, but using a different accent.
Can't you almost smell it coming? I mean, you can. You're like, oh gosh, here we go. Not, and it's like the close to the close before the close happens, and you're thinking, why did we start that? Why were there 3 extra chapters here?
Yeah. So what I will point out with my book, it was when I did mine, it's a process of setting a business up a certain way and marketing and all that. So I couldn't make it really short. But like I said, there's a lot of books I've read where, first 50 pages and you go, I don't really need, but you don't need to read the rest of the book until you finish reading it and you go, should have stopped at page 50. Yeah.
So the other thing I've done an extremely poor job of is promoting these. I just sort of doing this content that sort of sits on my website and it's in Amazon, and I don't really sort of it's sort of if I'm working with someone and say, hey, I thought you might find this of interest. But I do have one that is, and this kind of loops back to the beginning of the conversation. I have one that is about 150 pages. It is completely done, and I haven't launched it yet because I do believe that I need to have that sort of big push to make it, because I feel like it's that good. And it's called Billing Beyond You.
Yeah.
And it is that journey of how to take a solopreneur, how to take an independent consultant like I was when I started. How do you go from one person billing your time to scaling to millions? And it's going to tie back into that coaching that I'm talking about, helping people do that, because really I'm showing in them the system that I've developed. And I haven't, the pieces all aren't perfectly aligned for that piece. So I'm kind of sitting on that, but that's been done for almost a year.
Yeah, you've just got to, what you're probably best to do is hand it off to somebody else that you trust, get them to read it.
Yes.
And if they read the whole thing and go, wow, this is bloody good, get it out there, then you need to just get it out. Because I think sometimes, when I wrote my book, I sat there, I wrote it. I would still be writing my first one back in, that was published in 2014. It would still be sitting on my computer, not out, if I hadn't had someone say, will you just send it to a publisher?
Yeah.
And get them to do the edit, and they'll tell you what's missing.
No, listen, Tyson, I've already had a professional editor edit it, and she was like, "This is so good. How do I, as a professional writer that's a solopreneur, how would I do this?" She was peppering me with questions. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And I need to do it. You know what's funny, Tyson? I just said that I start things and I just do them, and I was speaking so boldly, and here I am sitting on something.
So how about you said? What about you say it now? Like it's July 2019. That your book will be done and out there by the end of 2019.
Okay, I'll say it. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to have to. So here's the great takeaway for your listeners. When you make a statement like this, you make a claim like this, you then have to start asking friends to help you. So Tyson, will you help me?
Yeah, definitely help you.
Awesome. Because I don't know who to send to. I have zero connections in the book world. Yeah. I'd love that. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I can put you in touch with a few people that I know will help give you a little bit of a kick along. So before we wrap up, if people want to get hold of you, Carey, where do they find you?
Well, I am very active on LinkedIn, and so just Carey Rome, and CareyRome, LinkedIn. Our company website is Cypress, CYPRESS, resources.com. And you go there, you can find me.
Okay, that is cool. So, Carey, I want to thank you for coming on It's No Secret, Dr. T. This has been, I always feel that every time I have a really good guest on, my intelligence level goes up just a little bit. And I feel better after a conversation when I feel smarter than before I started the conversation. And you have definitely, taken me up that little notch. So I want to thank you for coming on It's No Secret, Dr. T.
Well, likewise, because from talking to someone, the best way to have just a meaningful conversation is thoughtful questions, and you are exceptional at that. And I've just really enjoyed this conversation.
No, it's been great. And I just want to tell other people, you also have a podcast. So if they've enjoyed this one, they've enjoyed listening to you, there is a podcast which has got a really, really cool name called Caged Vision Podcast. So there'll be a link in my show notes so people can go and find that. And I have been a guest on your show as well. So this has been absolutely fantastic. And it was Esty Rand, wasn't it, who introduced us to each other. And Esty has been a previous guest on It's No Secret with Dr. T as well.
So good. So good. Listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thanks for having me on.
No, this has been great. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Carey Rome today. As I always do, I get so much from my guests, and that's why I always tell them at the end. And there was a quote that Carey said that I think is worth repeating, and it was, have firm beliefs that are loosely held, which means firmly believe in the path that you're on, but don't be stubborn enough that you're not prepared to pivot. And I think it's also really important to remember that your team understands the vision and the path that you're going on, and don't equate it just to money. Let them see and feel where it is that you want to actually take your business. And if they can get on that journey with you, I think you'll find your team will be a lot more motivated. So before I go, just want to mention that if you've been enjoying this podcast, please tell your friends and family. And if you happen to be on your podcast platform, you see that little review button, give it a click and tell people what you think of this particular show. And during the podcast, I mentioned that I've written 2 books. One was podiatry related, called It's No Secret, There's Money in Podiatry. And the other one is a small business book, It's No Secret, There's Money in Small Business. So if you haven't checked them out, please check them out. I'd love for you to get hold of a copy and also give me feedback on what you think. So that's it for me. Look after yourself, look after your family, and I will talk to you again next week. And in the spirit of sharing, here's 2 more podcasts that I think you may enjoy and want to check out. Bye for now.
I did not grow up with very much money.
Money's energy.
Money is something that really scares me.
You had about 60 grand in debt.
Money isn't the answer.
Somebody should just give me a lot of money.
My dream was to be the WWE wrestler, but you realize that your dreams change over the years.
Money is a tool. It's a key to a gate. And at the other side of the gate is the things that you really want to do with your life. It's the things that matter most to you. It's pursuing those values that make you ultimately happy.
Listen to Inspired Money at inspiredmoney.fm.
My name is Eric Hunley, and I host Unstructured. On Unstructured, I have intimate conversation with a diverse range of people. I've interviewed a presidential candidate and a felon, not the same person. I've even chatted with a musher. Yep, a sledder behind a pack of dogs. And in these conversations, we learn what drives these folks. Please, come check out Unstructured. You can find Unstructured wherever you listen to podcasts.